Chapter 3 Drop. Vinyl had just arrived at home after a particularly stressful day. If it wasn't enough to have been late to class on the first day of school, she was humiliated in front of her class by an obnoxious filly, confronted by a melodramatic sandwich aficionado, haunted by an old memory, and essentially thrown into a young fool's increasingly bleak life. At this point, there was nothing more that she wanted than to hop into her bed and sleep for at least a full day. However, apparently, that wasn't what was going to happen. Instead, she found herself in a staring contest with her own mother, and she wasn't exactly sure why. The tension in the air became apparent. Not a sound escaped any pony or anything for upwards of 15 seconds. Vinyl wasn't sure how to break it. Should she answer the question or avoid it, as she'd always done? That was her first question. Her second, of course, was the question of whether her mother would believe the truth. After all of the question-dodging and lying, did mezzo-soprano even believe Vinyl had the capacity to tell the truth? Perhaps, she thought for a moment, she'd get a cutie mark in deception. What could I do with a cutie mark in deception? Vinyl thought about that for a brief moment. Maybe I could be a spy. The thought came to her before halting. Vinyl, you're getting off track. The filly turned away and let out a sigh unconsciously. Well? Vinyl's mother simply shouted right in her daughter's face, with no apparent sign of compunction. You were to arrive here over 3 hours ago. Your dinner is cold. So it looks like tonight's going to be another one of those nights, Vinyl thought to herself. After turning back to her mother, she decided on the course of action she would take, and responded, As if I was supposed to know that. Now that you two even bothered to say bye when I left. It made me late because you wouldn't bother to make me up on time. Vinyl quickly retorted. It was true. Her parents had been completely inattentive that morning, and they both knew it. Do you even know what I've been through today? I hardly think the events of your day have any impact on this conversation. You really don't have a clue, Mom, Vinyl almost cried. Almost. I am your mother, and you will refer to me as such, young filly. Save it, Mom, Vinyl grunted. Come on, you two. Can't you both calm down? Paradiddle broke his silence and walked to the feuding dam and filly, separating them with a basic barrier spell. Now what, pray tell, was that for? Maisel asked the question almost sarcastically. For getting right in Vinyl's face, dear. You don't have to antagonize her or anything. That goes for you too, Vinyl. He pointed to Hoof at the little unicorn. I'm sure she's got a good explanation. Now, Vinyl, what have you been through today? Vinyl had wished her father would ask that for quite a while. With a deep breath, the filly began to pace around the floor in an attempt to somehow gather her thoughts. Should I tell them the truth? She suddenly realized how often the thought came to her during talks with her parents. Yeah, this time they should know. She stopped walking and turned to her parents. I had to steal to get breakfast. When I got to school, late, I should add, I couldn't even afford my lunch with the bits you gave me. She turned to Paradiddle. So I stole a little bit of my lunch, too. I got put down by Bubblegum Pop, that jerk filly from last year. You might remember her. Or you might not care enough to remember her. She turned to her apathetic mother. And when me and Breakbeat left school to go to the museum, we almost got chased by the same stallion I stole my breakfast from. Well, Vinyl, it sounds like you're having a bit of problem with taking things that aren't yours. Paradiddle gently inserted himself into her speech. I'm not done yet. Do you know what happened on my way home with Breaker? We found a filly from school, a blind filly, in an alley. And we had to be there to find out that her mom died. And after all this crap, I got home. I just wanted to go to bed, but no. You have to get right in my face and talk to me like I'm a bad pony. Vinyl wasn't aware of it at all, but at this point she was screaming. Now, Vinyl, when you said me and Breakbeat, I believe you meant Breakbeat and I. And speaking of Breakbeat, didn't I once tell you not to mention that fall musician's name in my presence? Vinyl's mother questioned her as if she had a reason to antagonize her daughter. Mom, did you even listen to what I just said? Some pony's mother died, and you're going to correct my grammar and tell me what to do? Do you even care about what makes me upset? Vinyl paused. Or do you just hear the things that make you want to hate me? Is that it? Do you just want to hate me? Vinyl, just calm down. Your mother doesn't hate you. Paradiddle walked her way and attempted to hold his daughter in an embrace, but was brushed aside by her hoof. Don't hug me. I'm tired of you guys already. If you'll excuse me, I'm going up to my room. Vinyl started to make her way up the stairs. Don't go yet, Vinyl. What we all need right now is some calming music. Paradiddle telekinetically moved the needle on the gramophone in the nearby kitchen onto an already placed vinyl record. The ambient sounds of synthesizer filled the room before being overshadowed by those of the piano player, dancing along keys in some magnificent harmony. Once the piano had been properly introduced, a percussion beat came into play. With the sound of a short drum fill, everything came together. Still, the music seemed empty. The instruments were alone, with nothing to follow. That was until the saxophone came in to guide the rhythm. Everything together and on, perfectly in sync. Somehow, the music reached even Vinyl's mother, whose hostility seemed to melt away like butter. However, as the two parents always seemed to fail to notice, it didn't reach Vinyl. From the moment the sound of the synthesizer had started to fill the room, the filly had been cringing in disgust, and only grew more irritated as it continued, standing stagnantly halfway up the staircase. You seriously think that's what I need? She questioned her father as the music in the background began to crescendo. Well, it always helped me to calm down, he answered. Vinyl didn't allow him to breathe before coming back down to ground level and speaking. It always helped you. That's the thing, Dad. You apply everything to yourself. You know, maybe I don't like that jazz stuff as much as you. And same with you. Vinyl pointed her hoof directly at her mother. I don't care about opera and classical music. She placed a hoof on her forehead. That junk is so boring. I can't listen to a single minute of music that either of you like because it just puts me to sleep. And you don't even notice. Have either of you even begun to consider the fact that my taste in music could be different? The sound of strings were all that was left. Neither of her parents seemed to have anything to say for a moment. As Vinyl expected, her mother was the one to break the silence. Vinyl, don't be absurd. Your maternal family is renowned as the greatest in both classical and neoclassical equestrian music. Your great-grandmother was a renowned pianist in the New Romantic period. Your grandmother and her viola took a place at the forefront of the post-romantic revival. My beautiful voice is famous all over Equestria. It's been over 150 years since your maternal family hasn't spawned a proper musician, and that was simply because the poor mare was deaf in one ear. I'm more than positive that you will learn to enjoy continuing our tradition. No! The little pony shook her head vigorously. Have you seen what I do to your fancy instruments? I break everything. Her mother lost herself in thought momentarily before replying. No matter. I'll train you to be an excellent singer like myself. Or I could get my cousin to teach her. He was a great crooner back in the day. Paradiddle chimed back in. I can already tell this isn't going to go anywhere. Like I said, I'm going to my room. Don't you two come up here. I'm locking. Vinyl said with a touch of disappointment. Vinyl began to walk up the stairs once more as her parents, obviously having ignored her, began to argue over who would aid her in beginning her non-existent singing career. The sound of hooves clacking against the marble got lost in a fusion of guitar chords and feckless conversation. Peering through a gap in the balusters at her parents from halfway up the stairs, the unicorn began to wonder if they would ever notice that she had left. Once she reached the top of the staircase, she looked just once more at her bickering parents. They hadn't even looked away to check on her. She walked wordlessly down the second-floor hallway for a short time, the sound of her parents exchanging heated words starting to fade away before reaching her room. The sound of the door slamming behind her went as unnoticed by her parents as the failure herself. The click of the lock on her door was the first positive sound Vinyl had heard all night. As she entered her room, her first thought was to relieve herself of the burden of her saddlebag, and as such, she used a bit of magic to telekinetically toss it to her bedside. Vinyl Scratch's room seemed to be her only remaining place of solace. On one side her modest bed rested, awaiting her with warm black and white sheets that popped with the violet walls. Unused gramophone records sat against the bottom of the footboard, collecting the dust and depression in the air. When was the last time I saw those things spin? Vinyl saddened herself with the thought. She turned to her right, where a vanity mirror sat atop a dresser filled with unnecessary clothes. All that thing is good for is getting my hair ready. Wonder why she even got those clothes. Vinyl swiped the thought aside and walked to her bedside, where she looked up at the walls, once covered in posters, now left blank. I know she didn't want me listening to music, but did she have to take everything? Vinyl thought to herself. Everything wasn't exactly an understatement. Not only had she lost posters of her favorite artists and her turntable, which, for all intents and purposes, had left her vinyl records useless, but she had lost both her headphones and her pictures with Breakbeat. Everything went to the attic. Suddenly thinking about Breakbeat, after looking at her records, she thought to herself, I wonder how Breakbeat and Gliss are. I bet they're having a great... Wait. Yeah. Vinyl's words faded away. I hope she's okay. She seems kind of delicate. The unicorn walked to her window and looked out at the other side of her suburb. After scanning the houses for a few seconds, she made a decision. I've got to see him. This place is getting old. Maybe after those two fall asleep? Vinyl listened intently for the sounds of a continuing argument between her parents. Nothing. Are they already asleep? Vinyl wondered, wordlessly. Whatever. I guess I should wait a little while, just in case they aren't totally gone yet. With this thought, the unicorn walked back to her bedside and climbed in, but not after having to hoist herself up, using her forelegs. Once in bed, she lay down, hitting her pillow with a thud and allowing her hair to splay outward as she finally allowed herself time to think. Why don't they get it? I'm different from them, so what? It's not like that needs to be a big frickin' deal. Lots of ponies have different talents and interests than their parents. Vinyl looked up at her ceiling for a moment, gazing at each carefully painted star that attempted to shine in the darkness of her room.